Hi, Anastasia. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
Absolutely. So, welcome to the Intrinsic Mindset Show. And I'm really looking forward to kind of diving in a few different subject matters with you. I know that from the exchange we've had, and sometimes with podcasting, it's maybe it's a referral and everything, but there's a mutual community that we came from. So I get to see a little bit of your story in writing, but it's always so much better to share and exchange those stories. And I know that you have I'm going to call it a roller coaster, but I feel like that's not fair. We all have those ups and downs,
Yeah.
and you are very dedicated to healing. I do want to jump into the psycho-spiritual
Mhm.
mentor. I believe you have, and a teacher, soul path mentor.
Mm.
I genuinely love that. So we'll kind of jump into it from here. And I really just want to start with your story.
Yeah.
I think that's a great place to start, and we'll grow and flow from there.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that it's been a roller coaster. And as someone who is in this line of work, the work of teaching other coaches and counselors and therapists as well, I was diagnosed with bipolar quite early on in life, in my early 20s. It has been a roller coaster, been a really interesting journey learning to coexist with that and to
Hmm.
thrive despite it. I'm a real believer that we can reprogram ourselves to any
Yeah.
level. So nothing limits us, absolutely nothing.
Yes. I love that. And if I may actually even ask about kind of just that bipolar in a sense. So this is when you were saying that, it was almost a feeling or not quite a vision,
Mm.
but it's really the idea of experiencing duality.
Yeah.
And there is a power in that too. And I guess when we're talking about reprogramming or reframing,
Mm.
to experience the duality of the high and the low
Mm.
within a subset or an idea or a vocation or a location in
Mm.
life, being able to be the observer. And I don't want to assume anything, and maybe this is something you can add on to it, but I could imagine you could get lost in
Yeah.
either side and have the pull and back and forth where it really is a tormenting process. Or if you're able to find a middle of an observation and see, I'm experiencing this, I'm feeling this side, I'm feeling this side. To be the observer in there could be a real superpower,
Yeah.
and to reframe and reprogram that.
You
I
actually
think that there
framed
could,
that really
you know,
beautifully. And becoming the observer, that is a practice. That is a lifelong
yeah,
practice, which
yeah,
I actually think is relevant to everyone, to not let life's circumstances, because maybe in this particular case, it's your internal world that has this extreme duality, but life can give us that as well, right? So it's really
hmm,
about becoming the observer in our life and to our patterns and to our default
yeah,
programming. What is my default setting that I am naturally inclined to have a preference to respond with? And how can I dissolve that automatic response and start to be more conscious in how I respond, because then it has everything to do with how I perceive, how I receive, and how I show up and how I deliver in the world as well, which has a ripple effect into every area of your life and the outcomes as well as a result of that.
absolutely. And you actually touched on something too, where, and maybe it was just the way I interpreted it. It was almost you touched on the external of that as well, because we were kind of touching on the polarized aspects of those dualities, but there was also the world itself has influence. So there is an externalization. There's the internal world, and that is to be the observer within the internal world is a superpower. But to have the external world, there are influences, there are things, and not in the sense of being victimhood or being necessarily controlled by them, but we're co-creating with our external
Yeah.
world all the time. And how are we receiving and how are we creating those ripples in the pond, to your point?
And you are a product of your environment. Your
Yeah.
environment plays such a big role in who you are and how you see the world. So I teach what is called the Soul Path Ikigai, which essentially has
Oh,
four pillars. And those four
mhm,
pillars are: number one, for me, the most important one is a connection with your higher self. So, higher self being God, being a higher power, being your God self, the higher power within you as a channel. The second pillar is aligned relationships. So, yes, these are interpersonal relationships, professional relationships as well, and probably most important relationship that you have with yourself, your significant other, the person that you choose to do life with. The third pillar is your career slash creative expression. I love for
Mm.
these to be one and the same thing. However, some people have compartmentalized that for whatever reason and kept them as two separate things. And then the fourth one, which is exactly what we're discussing right now, environment, lifestyle. Does your lifestyle support your soul path? These are the four pillars or the four legs of the table, essentially, which you are building. And if these are out of alignment, that's normally where we tend to feel out of harmony, out of balance.
Yeah, and the ikigai. So that definitely, whoever's listening to this should really explore that, the essence of that too. And thank you for sharing this because I'd love to really kind of touch on as much of these as we can. I think that foundationally, this is incredible. So, environment is the power of that. Where I kind of want to think about that is because you mentioned reprogramming or reframing, and our environment has an incredible impact in our daily
Mm.
life. And I guess if you're working with somebody or you're mentoring somebody, is there a path to changing that environment, or are those glacial, slow changes?
Yeah,
And this is obviously relatively, it's going to be at a different
yeah,
location level for everybody.
yeah,
But sometimes real or imagined, it's real to us at all
yes.
times. When we're feeling the pains
Hmm.
and the high levels of emotions, it's real to us, regardless it's imagined or real. But so the let's just touch on the environment before we jump to the other ones because we're
Yeah,
already there. But I guess changing that environment,
yeah,
and that can touch into all sorts of aspects of life. So I definitely want to hear your thoughts. But it can be the love, it can be the careers, it can be the monies, it could be the health, it could be many different things.
absolutely. And it's exactly as you say, it could be your external environment. I've had clients from the Ukraine, which I have supported before, during, and since them leaving, having to leave their war torn country. And then I've had clients that their toxic or unsafe environment is their home environment, their family, their partner. And in terms of how we change that, you asked if it was like glacial, gradual, or if it is something that you can, um, I guess, eject yourself from. And that really has everything to do with your tolerance level. How high is your tolerance for pain? And if you have been in a toxic environment your whole life, you just don't know any different, right? And normally the people that reach out to me that have been in toxic environments from childhood, they don't know any different. All that they know is that their soul is uncomfortable where they are, which is why they're looking for someone, something to help them to feel better. And that's normally the people that
Yeah.
reach out to me. There's no one size fits all, Paul. It's completely unique to you and to how extreme you are, how much you are able to tolerate, because even a big change, again, requires a very high tolerance for all the impact that will come with a big sudden change as well. I am someone that is quite extreme. As we said, I have extreme highs and extreme lows. So I am someone that will tend to take big actions and make big decisions that will change the trajectory of my life. Although I do support people that it's a more gradual, a softer process almost. And there's no one size fits all. It has everything to do with your support system and your tolerance levels.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There is, in essence, how far we're into something. So, what I mean by this is there was a book written about the end of the Cold War with Russia retreating out of Afghanistan, and the retreat was very costly to them. And, I don't condone or stand on anybody's side with war, but a very costly thing. But it was the allegory of the retreat. There's the emotional retreats that we take, or trying to get out of a relationship, out of a bad family dynamic, out of a bad job or career situation, whatever that version is for ourselves to make that change. I really like that you brought up that pain tolerance because it really is an uncomfortable scenario to become somebody new or
Yeah.
be in uncharted territories. And then there was another point you had made about field awareness, the awareness when you're in a situation and it's all you
Yeah.
know, to have perspective outside of that can take somebody else to do that, or it can take something that's going to jar your life.
Mm.
Maybe the universe, maybe your higher self, like, just pulls you out, rips you out of that situation. And then you're like, oh, well, what do I do?
Mm.
I don't even know and you feel unstable and you don't have your feet underneath you.
Yeah.
So that can be a very, I think you articulated it. Not a lot of people put the word, say, pain tolerance or, just pain to it. So thank you for kind of recognizing that aspect of it because it's not necessarily
Mm.
easy. And I think sometimes people want to put a very flowery, um, rainbowy type
Yeah.
of thing
Like
to it.
the grass is
Face,
greener on the other side. All you gotta do is
yeah,
jump the fence.
yeah, or and don't focus on the
Mm.
pain, just
Mm.
focus on all the nice little things in the world because then but you're just burying some of those
Yeah.
deep pains and you're not working through changing the program like you
Yeah.
had mentioned.
There's actually something that
And that's
I read many years ago that said that men tend to struggle to leave something that they have been financially invested in. So you will see men stay
yeah,
in financially difficult situations for longer than is necessary, and women struggle to leave situations that they're emotionally invested in.
most that's very interesting.
If we consider the phases of life, every new phase of life requires a birth. And when you were in your mother's womb, that was your whole world. For 9 months, that was the world. It was this beautiful, warm, dark, liquidy place where you could hear a heartbeat, where you could hear muffled sounds, and that was safe. And your birth through the birth canal was a scary end of world as you know it situation. And then you were birthed into a whole new world with bright lights and people and sounds. And it really is like that when you are going through certain transformations. It feels like the world as you knew, or at least the world that you built, no longer exists. And it requires
Right.
you to relearn being in the world, in this different world.
Yeah. I think too, it's kind of a fear of success in the sense of because I think there's elements of that where we self
Yeah.
sabotage. In that kind of thought process of a fear of success, I really see a few different things sometimes. It can be a fear of ownership. Oh, now I have to own this new life, this new thing. The other one is at a deep level, I think, when people are fear, and success is subjective. So it's not exactly success, but it's
Mm.
change. It's kind of the fear of change. And to be in a new place, a new surrounding, or to ask for a bigger, more beautiful life that we envision or whatever that is, the person that I am today won't be the same person in that scenario. Whether I like it or
Mm.
not, we have to be or become something different. If we cling on to the old, you kind of touched about that old world that we don't want to, we're white knuckling the wheel. We want to stay there. We're kind of being drawn away from it. And that can be scary
Yeah.
because you don't know who you're going to be. But I believe that's when you get into and I don't want to go off on another track, but even too with the pillars, when you're talking about connections, relationships, the co-creations and the creative energy, if you have confidence and security within those, there is an element of being, I'm going to be okay,
Yeah.
and knowing like the universe has your back, or
Yeah.
in these elements and thoughts and feelings and emotions that tie into that. So sorry, I kind of just took the mic and ran with
No,
that, but
I
you
love
really
it,
kind of
I love
sparked the
it.
thought in that.
Yeah, and
Yeah, you really,
actually, I have pretty divine perspective on everything now. That's definitely not
yeah,
the version of me before, when I was going through certain experiences. But I believe that if it's all God, it's all good. And God is always doing things for you, to you, and through you for a very specific purpose. So even if it doesn't feel, because your perspective and because your attachment to certain outcomes, even if it doesn't feel good, that is good in itself, because that's the trigger that you might need to say that this is more than I can tolerate.
yeah, yeah. And in behavioral science or even consumer behavioral patterns, the big motivators are self, other, and we call systemization or something. There's many systems within systems, the bank systems, and what drives us to do something, self and other. In those, you get into the concern surroundings or the security of us. What we talked about, what we touched into the divinity of that is almost like a concern for self, concern for other. What we may adverse to feeling silly, looking silly, stumbling in front of people, And that external other can sometimes stop people. So if you could elaborate a little bit the external environment of concerns of other people and what they're going to
Find that shame seems to be the biggest burden that people carry, shame of failure or fear of being made a fool of. And like you said, even the fear of success, that fear of success also comes with certain kind of fine print that, well, if I change, then I will lose my friends and family. They will view me differently. And you use the term self-sabotage, which, yes, is a common phenomenon. People will stop themselves from being bigger because they're scared of what that would mean to other people. And in my teachings, I teach that shame is not a real emotion. Because if we look at the animal kingdom, the only other animal that appears to feel shame and guilt is the domesticated dog, which has been trained by us. The reason
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we teach them that by punishing them,
Yeah.
or by shaming them or guilting them so that we can manipulate their behavior, right? And that is where shame
Wow.
comes into play. It's being
Yeah.
pre-programmed into us so that it can manipulate our behavior on the collective field.
Yeah. Wow, that's a very powerful statement. And I think with the manipulation too comes the guilt. I know that throughout my adulthood and even childhood, I feel like I've suffered with guilt and I've let that drive me or not drive
Yeah,
me, not taking action
yeah.
because of some guilt or some dutiful
Mm,
version of that. And the shame, I think some of it can be very subtle from our families to our
mhm.
school environments to our work environments. Sometimes I believe it could be intentional because people just want what they want, so they're gonna manipulate and drive
Mm,
and rile people up to get what they want, you being susceptible to it. The shame and the guilt is a very powerful driver to do something or driver to not do
yeah.
something, an inhibitor
Yeah, and
in a sense.
religion has really played a really big part in
Yeah.
teaching us, shame and guilt.
Yeah, and it's a very like, almost in a binary way, I think it's like good, bad,
Yes.
it's
Right,
just
wrong.
yes or no, and then it's like, here's the rule book,
Mm.
follow our rule book and fit
And the
in the box.
consequence of being wrong is being ostracized or dying
Yep,
or,
yeah,
going to prison or being stoned or being
yeah.
burned at the
Or
stake.
in the religion is going to
Mm.
hell and burning in fire for all eternity,
Yeah.
there's this which is I think you touched on something really, powerful too, is that there can be deep-rooted survival fears that hit us as well. Again, real or imagined, even if they're just imagined, they're real to us, and sometimes there's stuff that are it's almost benign or small little decisions we make, and they feel so big. They feel like,
Yeah.
"I'm gonna die if I make this decision or if I do this." That's the feeling. It's not you don't cognitively think you're really gonna die, but
Yeah.
there's a deep feeling
But
in your gut.
even what you said, sometimes it can be as subtle as if I do this, I will upset my wife or I will upset,
Yeah.
my mom, my dad. And we almost kind of bypass a lot of things from a place of people pleasing as well.
Oh, yeah, good point, and as you were saying that, I was just thinking of the people pleasing
Mm,
and how we can kinda dance around and change ourselves, and I know that, again, I think we all do this to some level, some people more than others, some people less, but I know there's times too that I've experienced that I show up as a different person to different people.
yes.
Because pacify the
Mm,
situation, being like, "I don't want somebody to get upset here, because then I gotta deal with it," or, "I know they're gonna, kinda fly off the handle, so let's just all kinda dance around a little bit on eggshells,
yeah.
so we just don't say certain
Yeah.
things," or you end up showing up different for different people, and it's
It
exhausting.
is.
And I think if people are empathetic or they're sensitive and they can feel the
Yeah.
emotions in the environment or the collective
Yeah.
consciousness, I believe that we do it even more sometimes
Yeah.
to pacify those situations.
Absolutely. And I work with couples as well. And this is something that comes up quite a lot
Mm.
with couples when one person feels that they can't fully be themselves because the other person is too sensitive. And then the sensitive person feels that that person is not being authentic or their apology is not sincere. So even in the people pleasing, there is a form of manipulation happening so that I can garner your approval as well.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, it's not that it's sad. This
Yeah,
is some of the stuff. It's the human
yeah,
experience. This is the beauty and the divinity of what we get to experience through these
yeah,
lifetimes. And I guess, we can take it and we can learn from those situations and not be as swayed or
yeah,
concerned with the external environment, show up more authentically
yeah.
ourselves. And not to jump, but I actually do want to, go to that. You said the career and the creative,
Mm,
the essence of the creativity and the creative mind or the seeding, the creation
mm,
energy is so near and dear to my heart as far as like talking about that. I think it's such a powerful thing. I
mm,
think there's so much of the idea of creation energy. Sometimes I shouldn't generalize, but I think we are incredibly creative creatures. Some of it does fall in those realms of the manipulation.
mhm,
I do believe, but to create something new, like I either don't have this or I have this and I want to change this, I want to be something. And there's a creative path. And some of the creativity I really see as a much more flow than a rigid
mm,
path. Because the creativity is to be able to flex through
yeah,
this, to be able to absorb
yeah.
through that process, through that journey.
And that comes, as well with us being more fluid and more flexible as people, right?
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
in terms of our boundaries, because the term boundary work has been going around so much, and I feel like it's almost used now as a crutch to get away with or excuse us
Yeah.
not being considerate of anybody else but myself, just like completely turning inwards to the ego, the me, the I, and then, slapping the label boundary on it, and it's okay
Right.
because I'm
Yeah, like hiding
yeah,
behind it
hiding
or
behind
something.
boundaries. And I think with creativity as well, because creativity feels like something that is from your heart. It's not
Mhm.
something that's a skill or just a job that is, we can do those things because we have to or because we studied it. It doesn't feel as personal. So you will find artists and creative thinkers and creative people do tend to be more on the softer, sensitive side. And those are the same
Yeah.
people that uh, tend to have a negative relationship with money. So there's this belief that I can't live from the thing that I love. And that is
Oh,
the
yeah.
biggest lie that beautifully creative people subscribe to. And it becomes a self fulfilling prophecy because there's so many people that believe that. And live their life by it. So they do things that they don't really want to be doing, that doesn't set their hearts and soul on fire, that isn't a real contribution from their soul to the world, to society, and just living out of alignment.
Oh my god, you said that incredibly beautifully. Thank you so
Mhm.
much. That was awesome. Because yes, I believe that we can live these to your point is we can get well, let's use the career and the
Yeah.
money. I think it's a great example, but we can take a job, a job,
Yes.
and, you work the 8 to 4 or whatever the
Mhm.
version of that is, and you show up there,
Mm.
but you're not there.
Yeah.
And you're not really in a heart space and you create this
Yeah.
persona and you drive to work each day or whatever. And I don't want to oversimplify it or overgeneralize it, but you drive and you're there in body, but not in soul, mind, and
Yeah.
heart. And what a torn,
Identity.
over time.
Identity.
Yeah, thank you. You become fixed on the
Yeah.
identity and then you have this calling, and there's these callings of being that free
Mm.
flow, the freedoms, and it's like that's some of the stuff. I think that's even some of the stuff that can be with the desire of money. Is the money is just the representation of the freedoms
Yes.
that you can have because you're not reliant on
Yeah.
those control sets or whatever whatever that is.
Mm.
To create that relationship that I can't have that because of this and this doesn't supply this and
Mhm.
that separation
Yeah.
is I think you said it incredibly well to it's such a shame, and I think people start to retract
Mm.
too, the creative, they start to recess in it, and this is a little veer off, but I wanna come back to where we were, but it was like sometimes I've seen where it's almost like the creative, it can't be done in a vacuum.
Mhm.
True creativity is shared and
Yeah.
expressed. It's
Yeah.
received, it transgresses. So I may do something creative and you read it or hear
Mhm.
it or whatever, and then you receive it in a certain way, and then it's passed on through you to somebody else, and we co-create those, and it can't be done in a vacuum by itself.
Yeah.
So there's almost this contradiction with the activity. So that a creative, if you're not expressing it it's in a vacuum.
Selfish. It's selfish of
Yeah.
you to keep your gifts to yourself, you know? Like, those gifts can only flourish and thrive when they're being shared, and actually, your gifts can only truly unfold in service. And I just wanna
Mm,
put it out there as well that when we're talking about creativity, we're not just talking about art and music, but you can be really creative in startup businesses. You can have a
absolutely.
real talent to help people find their niche or find their brand tone of voice. That's a gift as well. You can
It
be
is.
creative in medicine as well. You can absolutely find alternative medicines and new ways of helping people and healing people and combining different modalities in the way that you help people to get better as well. So I want us to really expand our understanding of what creativity is.
Yeah, thank you, because it really is. I believe that the creativity, so much of it is in the small things. It's not the big grand gestures or somebody on a stage or some artist
Yeah.
that has a big sellout show. Yes, of course it's in there.
Mhm.
But those are those highlights. We don't see those people that are doing the small little creative to get to that space anyway.
Exactly.
But I love that you said that even in the business space, creating new business,
Mm.
creating new avenues, new connection points. Honestly, too, is that even in helping to people empower within settings, we talked about like a job setting. I mean, if you can help people to be really autonomous
Yeah.
and find those internal strengths, who they are as an individual within those sets. I mean, there's a creative path there too. That's a beautifully strong, and that's more people than not, the populace. So that's the empowering point of doing the healing works
Mm.
and
Mm.
things like you're doing with working with people and mentoring.
Yeah,
That's so
absolutely.
important.
And I think that this is my creative career, you know, this is me being
Yeah,
in my full element, because I do actually come from a dance and an art background, and I have been in the past a multi-passion entrepreneur. I've set up lots of different businesses. Like, those are skills and talents that I've naturally developed over time.
yeah.
And maybe like a talent that I also naturally had. And I think I was always trying to find my voice in all those things. And it's really interesting, shall we say, that I've come back full circle to something that I used to love doing as a little girl, and that was writing poems. And now
Oh,
I feel that my word and my voice is my gift. And I
mm.
love it. And the more I do it, the more I help people and activate people.
That is, and that's actually a beautiful there's a poetry to even when you say that, to kinda coming back as a
Mhm.
child. I think the essence of that too, the way I kind of view it, we go through life, we have the awe and wonder as a child. Everything is an adventure. Everything is new. You see a tree for the first time and it looks like the earth is trying to reach for the sky. We don't know what these things are. So you have that awe and wonder. We go through life, we learn, we compound, we have experiences. And then the beauty of it as we go on through life is that we get to bring all these strengths, knowledges, and experiences to retain the wonder and the excitement and the adventure as a child. That's one of the biggest superpowers I really believe people can have.
Yeah.
And when we were talking about creativity, I really believe it's in that too. It's not just creative in the sense of you draw a really nice picture. There's a deep
Mm. Yeah.
creation energy, having the awe and wonder of seeing something almost for the first
Yeah.
time, but through eyes that you've seen it many times. And I think when you're in those states of mind, um, there's just such a release and beauty
Yeah.
to it. You can see the same thing you've seen 100 times, even on a drive. You drive the same way every day. There's sometimes if you're really in those spaces, you can see a new light, a new life.
Yeah.
You can see the surroundings,
And that's
and that's
exactly as you described it, you know, when we're kind of like on autopilot. And I feel that we
mm,
do live our life as adults, at least on autopilot,
yeah,
and we become so desensitized to things, and therefore really desensitized to ourselves and the effect that these things have on us. My modality, rapid alignment therapy, is a form of hypnotherapy, and it's really to help people to
okay,
wake up from the trance that they're under, because all these
yeah,
programs, these autopilot programs, that's a trance state. You're living in your trance state rather than in your awake state. And it's in your awake state which you can tap into what you described, where things just get created through you. You're in your flow state, and you can see it with like top performing athletes and musicians. They talk about the flow state where, the lyrics just came through them, or the movements just came through their body. It's almost as if they were an outside observer to this thing being birthed through them.
Yeah. It could be even a speech. It could be
Yeah.
whatever it is, a
Mm.
conversation. That really kind of shook me when you said that, because it's almost like bear with me for a second. I'm going to come back to this, but I think in life too, there can be these things where, the sports analogy or whatever, like there's the rules, but so many things, I believe the rules are really the opposite. It's like
Yeah.
life's supposed to be hard, and it's not. It's supposed to be play. And that's, whatever version of that expectation is. But what you did there too is, if we're in the program state,
Yeah.
we're actually in a form of, I'm going to say what I think people would interpret as being in a state of hypnosis. And then the hypnosis is actually the awareness of the
Mm.
opening of that. And I love the very concept of how you laid that out, because it's almost the reverse. I think there's perception of that awareness, or whether it's hypnosis, some other modality, or breath work, or whatever
Yeah.
sparks and ignites something in somebody. So that's a really cool
The
enlightenment thing.
solution
I just got to
is
experience.
always in the
Yeah.
question. The
Yeah.
solution is always in the question. All you need to do is ask the question differently. That's the one thing
Yeah.
that I've learned with working with the subconscious mind, is that you have all the answers inside you. You're just
Yes.
viewing them from the wrong angle. And
Mm.
there's a book by Paul Arden, who was a phenomenal advertiser back in the early 90s, who wrote a small little book, really beautifully designed, called Whatever You Think the Opposite.
Yeah. They'll I That's all. It's almost like the philosophical
Mm,
view
mm.
of life. It's really, what is that?
Yeah,
It's not even opposition, it's
mm.
just what is the other
Yeah.
side, reverse your
The
idea
black to
of
the
what.
white, the day to the
Yeah,
night. It's that
yeah, the yin
duality, the
yang.
word that we started with.
Yeah.
It really is the duality.
Absolutely, that came full
Mm,
circle, and it really is asking those. So maybe, I'm trying to think in a practical way, as if, if you can kinda understand, of how you're viewing the rules. We'll call it the rule set.
mm,
Maybe that's not the right way, but I'm just gonna call it the rule set, for lack of a better term right now. How are you viewing this, and kinda why are you viewing this? Then flip it
yeah,
and ask the exact
yeah,
opposite for the understanding. Like, what if the rules were exactly the opposite
yeah.
right now? What would that mean? What would it be? And
It's like
take that
playing devil's
philosophical
advocate
view.
to yourself a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
I
But in a
Yeah,
positive light, instead of
yeah,
just, and instead of just trying to figure out, like, because I think sometimes people do the devil's
yeah.
advocate, but they're kind of go like, what could
With
go
the
wrong in a bunch
negative,
of stuff?
yeah, yeah.
Use the negative, but what could go, you know, I guess the devil's advocate would be the angel's advocate or
Mm.
something. You
Well,
you flip the light side of that.
I have, an exercise called the truth exercise. And, whenever we're stuck, it's like, okay, well, let's do the truth exercise. Like, let's explore what your truth is, like your attachment to this truth. And we start
Yeah.
with the truth is, I feel whatever because, and then we go deeper into it. What does it validate? What does it give me? For example, like if I have a pattern of always losing money, let's just use that because that's something that everyone can resonate with. The truth is I want to lose money, right? Because consciously we're frustrated with it. And it's like, but I don't want this. Yes, but admit that you do so that we can find out what it's giving you. The truth is I want to keep losing money because, and this gets really
Mm,
uncomfortable. It validates that I'm no good with money. And this is true. And here we start to provide all the evidence for the case that we've built for why this is such a strong truth, why this is such a strong case. Ooh, it's really great if this is facilitated because we can't see our own blind spots, and if you're doing it by yourself, you might get frustrated and be like, well, that doesn't make sense. But if you're doing it with a professional, we keep going deeper and deeper, at least 7, 8 layers to, let's just say that I've concluded here because the truth is that I'm not good enough, or because the truth is that
yeah,
I'm not capable. And that
yeah,
you
and
will know that you hit the nail on the head because an emotion comes up to be relieved.
Yeah.
It's really, really revealing of your unconscious desires, which are always driving the truck.
Right. I think too is, yeah, you can hit those, you definitely hit those to the point where maybe it's I won't be loved or I won't be accepted or I won't be some version of that. And
Rejected.
there's yeah, I'll be rejected, I'll be ostracized, whatever at a really deep level.
Mm,
We do hit those. And I
mm,
think that doing those exercises is going to come up with actually a couple of other guests on my podcast as well, too, is the questions. So I'm
mm,
really glad you brought that up because the deep questioning, and I think I'm going to go on the journey of healing. I believe that we're all on this journey of self mastery. And I know that sometimes I've hit points where I've had the journey fatigue or
yes,
the healing fatigue
yes.
where it's like, I feel like I'm pulling the layers of the onion. I'm like, oh, there's another layer.
Mm,
Okay, here's another layer. So I'm not knocking it. I agree. It's the questions, but I think it's once you hit those that feel right, it's not that it's a kind of a shallow
mm,
pool a lot of times. It's not that deep. If we're digging too hard,
mm.
maybe we're not asking the right
Yeah,
questions, is really where I was trying to get
absolutely.
to. Or we're deflecting or something like that. We're kind of dancing around
Mm,
the real gut, the pain, the root chakra, the solar plexus,
mm.
and that arena. So the questioning is a very powerful thing. I wanted to really confirm that.
Reflect on that healing journey. I truly do believe that your healing does have an end date. And the reason that I believe this is because when we're healing, what we're doing is essentially in your book of life, we are going back to all the chapters previously where you didn't have the support, where you didn't have the tools, and maybe where you didn't have the level of consciousness to be able to deal with what needed dealing with at the time, right? Because life was happening to you
Mm,
for whatever
yeah.
reason. And once we've reviewed all those chapters and we've gone back again and we've reviewed them again and we've done, like a childhood healing a million times and we've done the somatic healing a million times, at some point you come to a place where you're in the middle of your book and it's like, okay, I've reviewed all those chapters. Now I get to step into my ascension. I get to step into my what am I consciously creating moving forward. And with these tools that I've mastered, I now am not healing from life. I'm just processing life. I get to process
Yeah.
my human emotions and my experiences. It's not a trauma
Oh,
trigger
yeah.
anymore.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. Because I fully agree too. There is a sense of that where we continue to kind of be addicted to it. And there's always this sense of like, I always feel broken. And even too, with some of the modalities or certain areas of spirituality or teachers and stuff like that. I mean, there's an incredible amount of great ones, but there are some that it's always just,
It's a
it's a
codependent
kind of a,
relationship.
it's a
They
codependent
need you
relationship.
to
Thank you.
always
That's
need
exactly it.
them, like
Right. Yeah.
I don't want to be the kind of therapist that someone needs for the rest of their life because that's me being
Yeah.
codependent on them to have clients for the rest of my life.
And that wrecking, oh, go ahead.
The best teacher, therapist, healer, mentor makes themselves obsolete so that now you
Yes. Thank you.
become the Buddha, the guru.
Yeah. Thank you. You nailed it exactly what I was going to say too. And that is a good teacher will teach themselves out of
Yeah.
something because you're truly doing it. And I think there can be differences here too with the coaching and the mentoring on different levels. It's not a one fit, but when you're truly mentoring, teaching, or being of service for somebody, you're doing it for their highest and
Yeah.
best and not necessarily interjecting your pains and your healing journey in them. The dependencies can start to build in there in those co creations.
Mm,
But when you're really doing it for somebody's true highest and best at their level and have them at the forefront of the growth,
mm.
I do believe the healing can go fast. Outgrow the mentor in that capacity or
Mhm,
in that
mhm.
category, but there's another iteration of that too, the confidant or whatever
Yeah.
it can be. So I'm really glad we talked about that too, because in the path, we all come across a lot of teachers, healers, mentors, and sometimes there is that little bit of an instinct. And I think it is important for people to
Mm.
recognize too. It's not that a lot of people are bad, good, whatever it is, not even a judgment thing. I think that some of it is just you and this other person's connection point. Listen to your
Yeah.
instincts. There's, if somebody is a good, you're gonna know when
Yeah.
somebody's a good mentor, good teacher, and things like that
Mhm.
at a really, really comfort, little ease space. But then there's that other side of it too. And I've seen those as well where it just feels a little sticky and a little bit of that gut feeling, the little
And
instinct. And I'm like,
there's a
just
little
not
bit of
quite sure.
ego maybe from the person that is,
Yes. Yeah.
helping.
Yeah.
Um, I call them the wounded healer. So in ancient Greek
Yes.
mythology, Chiron
Yes.
is,
Yeah.
the healer
He's
of
the wounded healer.
healers.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
obviously went through his life with his childhood trauma, so to speak. He was rejected by his mother at birth because he was a product of rape, and he was adopted by Zeus and, given the best education, etc. And he was always like a high achiever from a place of needing to overcompensate from that rejection. In the mythology, his friend Hercules accidentally injures his leg with a bow and arrow, and he couldn't physically heal himself from that wound. So he made the ultimate sacrifice to give up his immortality because he just wanted it to end. So I think that that is the end of the wounded healer, is that they're going to have to give up something that they're addicted to, that has made them feel important and valuable and valid. And maybe that's like a sort of ego death, just like allowing it to die and allowing your students, your clients to outgrow you. There's something beautiful about that, because it means that you are a phenomenal teacher in the same way that we want our children to outgrow us. We don't want to keep our children in our
Right.
shadow.
Right. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, I really enjoy that. I feel like that would be a fun podcast too, to talk about Greek
Bring me
mythology,
back and we'll
allegorical
have
connection.
lots more conversations about the art.
We should do that, even with the tales and the fables, how they tie into. I genuinely love that. So maybe we should try to do that in a few months. I want to make sure that I do touch on some other stuff. I did want to ask you one question about the psycho spiritual mastery. I wanted to hear from you about the term psycho spiritual, kind of what that means or where that came from, and
Yeah.
a little bit on that.
I think it had a lot to do with my own personal journey. It came from my own need. And it was from the desire to want to heal myself that I really went very deep into psychology and trauma training, and counseling, etc. And also finding relief or finding pleasure in spirituality. And I did find that it's that beautiful combination. And I think it's maybe down to the way that I view the world in this duality. Um, Psychology without spirituality lacks real depth and connection to your limitless potential, because it's very rational and very logical. So there's a limit there. And then spirituality without psychology is ungrounded and tends to be avoidant of some uncomfortable truths.
Mm,
So you need to bring both of those into your journey if you want to fully self-actualize, so that you can create harmony, so that you can create balance, because the mind can only stretch as far as it's seen or experienced. In the realm of the unknown is limitless possibility and potential.
thank you. That was really great, because that's almost like your left side and your right side of your brain when we get into that as well
The
too.
masculine and the
And I
feminine.
couldn't agree more.
Mhm.
Yeah, the masculine and the feminine too. And I think that that would be another big subject too, where it's people are putting, it's almost like the boundaries and stuff. People apply different rule sets and, are
Mm.
hiding behind certain meanings of stuff. But the balance of those things and the marrying of those things are such an incredible to understand both. And I think you put in the beginning of the God part, or maybe I'm misquoting you, the higher self and of this world, and the two coming together is incredible. And to be a teacher, you really have to be able to communicate it too. So the
Yeah.
psychology is important of understanding in this kind of corporeal world that things are measured, categoried, and cataloged. And that's how I think
Mhm.
some people receive the information, and then you're able to expand on it in the deep thought,
I
because there is a point where the categories do kind of uh, crumble at a certain point. And
Yeah.
the connective tissue is that the deep thought and the deep connection points. So
Mm.
that's a beautiful way. I love the term. That's why I wanted to ask about it too. And so you've had this incredible journey. Now, I know that we didn't even get into it at this point, but you've experienced things like divorce and bankruptcy and deep depressions.
Mm,
and come through that I'm gonna use your words, in a very vulnerable way to learn the modalities and to give some just practical advice. I know we talk about the ikigai and those 4
mm.
pillars. Are there some other very small, like that next step people can start to take, or being
Yeah.
self-aware? Do you have some advice on that path?
Yeah. I think to anyone that is struggling or maybe not finding answers to their questions, I would highly, highly recommend that they seek support because we can't see our own blind spots. And our very nature is to grow and evolve in relations. So there's a lot that we can do by ourselves, and then there's a lot that we need to do in relation. So, seek out someone to help you, to support you, to show you the way out of the forest. And then in terms of, some practices, for me, it's not about trying to fix the problem. It's not about trying to work from the outside in. It's if you fix the input, the output will fix itself. So assume all the responsibility because if I'm the problem, I'm the solution. If you're always holding everybody else responsible, there's too many variables in that equation for something to change.
Oh, that's great. The more we're focused internally and we're caught up in the judgments and everything else,
Mhm.
the more that people tend to externalize,
Mhm.
and the more we're able to expand our hearts. There's almost an element of being able to be at ease
Mm.
with the externalization and the external environment. And it is really interesting to kind of watch that. And I do believe that we can show up in different aspects of our lives in different ways. Like there's some aspects that we might feel a little broken, but in the same day, in the same sentence, we can show up so strong in another aspect of our lives,
Mm.
and in the heart space, the mind space, or the physical space, whatever those are.
Yeah.
That's what makes us such a beautiful creatures and complex, creative higher selves
Yeah.
channels.
Absolutely. Channel your higher self. Your higher self has all the answers. And your higher self is,
Mm.
is trying to guide you towards that higher timeline. So trust your intuition, trust your gut, learn to discern the difference between your lower self and your higher self so that you know which part of you to trust.
Yeah. So, here, one last thing before we end up kind of closing out here is I think in that realm of trust and faith, and however we want to put a word to it, is I think the word surrender,
Mm,
because this actually came up for me the other day where I was really fixed on the expectations. I was really upset,
yeah.
and I was just feeling the weight and the ickiness. And some of it is the separation of I have this, but I want this. And you can get really fixed in those mindsets. You can really get and one of the things I kept coming back to was I felt like I was kind of beating my head on the wall a little bit emotionally and mentally. I kept coming back to it was just a level of just the word surrender, and to kind of feel it rather than it as an action.
Yeah.
The I was like, okay, I'm going to surrender. Now, what is that action to surrender? And I was like, wait a sec, no, that doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
It was just the letting go or the surrender. And it's not that it's an inaction. You can have active surrender, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, the thought of that, or the idea of that.
Well, yeah, I guess in terms of learning to surrender, it's really about unbecoming. And like you said, Buddhist philosophy has taught us as well that it's attachment that will result in disappointment because we attach certain expectations, we attach to certain outcomes. And if I don't get exactly that, then, it's not what I want. But what if what I'm getting is what I need and not what I want. And what I need will lead me to something so much greater than I can currently imagine for myself. And ultimately, I want us to get to a place where the conversation of surrender and the conversation of trust is no longer necessary. Like, I want us to be trustless because whatever it is, and we accept it as it is, and we know, not trust, we know that it's all happening for us. And it's in presence that you can find peace, that you can find that state of surrender. It's being present because the only time that we're ever reaching for what's a good surrender practice and what's a good trust practice and what's a good peace practice is when I'm not being in the present moment and I'm traveling with my mind to places and to worst case scenarios, which is why I'm suffering.
Yeah.
So, meditation is a beautiful practice just to help you to come back to you and, I want to kind of also introduce that anything can be a meditative practice. For us, sometimes when we find ourselves too much in our mind, it's not about sitting with your legs crossed and trying to empty your mind. Maybe you need to chop wood and carry water. Maybe you need to break a sweat to come back into your body, to come back to a place where you can't travel with your mind, where you simply have to be here tired. That is also meditation.
That's excellent. So I don't even want to expand on that because you said that perfect. So thank you so much for joining today. If somebody wants to work with you or reach out, what's the best way to find you?
Facebook, Instagram are really great ways. I'm very active there. I also have a really great 3-day event or a 3-day kind of challenge, if you will, which is called the Soul Manifestation Code. And you'll be able to learn some of the tools that we discussed today, such as the truth exercise. You'll learn a little bit more about brain patterning and unconscious desires. And you can find those in the link in the show notes. So that's a free event for anybody to come.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul.